The need for Uganda to develop a national action plan on business and human rights was informed by the fact that from our national development plans, we are a private sector-led economy. What that means is that very many development projects are going on, very many investors are coming into the country, and their interaction with the host communities where these development projects are set up, the people that work with these investments, the value chains, all result into an interaction of business and human rights. So that development journey of the country required that we have a policy document that speaks to issues of business and human rights.
During the Universal Periodical Review, the last periodical review, we committed ourselves to developing this action plan. This action plan is in line with the UN principles on business, guiding principles on business and human rights. And so I'm glad that the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development was selected by the Interministerial Committee on Human Rights, chaired by Mofam, Minister of Foreign Affairs, to take the lead, and we have delivered.
We know that the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights is a key instrument that, if implemented, can harness the immense economic growth that comes with increased business activity, while at the same time ensuring maintenance of human dignity for the affected communities and individuals.
Uganda now joins a group of just 30 countries worldwide that have published a national action plan on business and human rights.
Today, we are gathered here to witness the launch of the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. Undoubtedly, the launch of the plan is an exciting event, but it is also not an end to the process, rather a new dawn for implementation of the plan.
So in 2016, during the UPR, civil society included the development of the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights in the submissions that were made to the Human Rights Council. And it so happened that the countries that engaged during the UPR also made these recommendations. For example, Norway and Kenya specifically made a recommendation that Uganda does develop a national action plan on business and human rights. So Uganda accepted that recommendation, and once the UPR process was over, civil society started working with government to ensure that actually this SNAP on business and human rights is developed.
So when I arrived, there had already been a lot of engagement and talk on these issues. There had, amongst others, been trainings for different stakeholders, including the Uganda Human Rights Commission. There had been civil society reports. There had been different policy framework assessments.
But the policy development in our country runs in a way that a regulatory impact assessment has to be conducted. The regulatory impact assessment procedure looks at measuring the options available for the state. Do we maintain the status quo? Do we do nothing as a country about issues of business and human rights? Or we strengthen the coordination and build capacity of institutions that government has to address the gaps that result from businesses interacting with their host communities, the people they work with, and the value chains. From that impact assessment, the regulatory impact assessment, it was very clear that we needed to strengthen the coordination and building capacity of the institutions to be able to address the gaps that result from the interaction of business activities and the human rights of the citizens.
So as private sector representative on this National Action Plan through the UN Global Compact, we had to give technical guidance in the area of how to domesticate the National Action Plan in the day-to-day operations of the companies. And this is by way of developing things like company policies, company manuals. So the National Action Plan has to be domesticated, and we, as the private sector rep, had to give guidance on how easy it would be to integrate all these things when eventually we have the National Action Plan.
The role that the Uganda Consortium on Corporate Accountability did in the development journey of the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights was to work through its membership across the country to bring the voices of the affected communities affected by development projects across the country into the room, and the consultation process included their views.
From the beginning, civil society has been working with government to develop the text and draft the National Action Plan. And for example, the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights also developed the background paper that was used to develop the text of the NAP.
And so one of the key avenues to identify what are the real issues came through when we organized regional consultations. Again, it was the resource group was at the helm of this initiative, and it was a really great interaction between ministries, civil society, the national institutions for human rights and the UN in taking forward these regional consultations across the country.
Our members that work with vulnerable groups like women and children made sure that the vulnerable communities were consulted from the regional consultations across the country. We also brought together members of the Private Sector Foundation, Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Association Limited, to also have the views of the private sector in the development of Uganda's National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights.
The National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights seeks to give effect to the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. But as a country, we have not had a comprehensive document that guides the country in terms of policy, in terms of legislation around this area. And yet we see that there have been challenges. Much as the businesses play a big role in terms of the development of the country, but there has been human rights challenges too that needed to be addressed. For example, things like free, prior and informed consent. These are concepts that do not currently exist fully in our laws. And the NAP provides guidance on what gaps actually need to be plugged in this area.
The plan lays out how you should respect fundamental human rights in the process of undertaking your business as a business person or as an entity or a company. And you've seen this happening many a time, including unfair compensation or no compensation at all when big establishments are being done. You've seen issues to do with the resettlement, people who are being resettled from one piece to another without being compensated. You've seen people unilaterally terminating workers without going through the due process. And so this action plan unpacks some of these hard concepts and lays it bare for the people to appreciate that, yes, they are the core in the process of development, put people at the center.
One thing that became very clear when we spoke at these regional consultations, when interacted with people, was that they were very interested in learning what would come out of this. So we consulted them, but they also said, please come back to us and tell us what the outcome of this process is. We want to see the National Action Plan. I really hope that there will be engagements with the colleagues we consulted and beyond on the National Action Plan, the issues that have been identified, the actions that are to be taken, so that this action plan actually becomes a reality.
The Uganda Consortium on Corporate Accountability calls upon all stakeholders that have worked with us in the development of Uganda's National Action Plan to support its implementation. The strength in this is that finally we have domesticated the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and with us having a National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, the Protect, Respect and Remedy framework in the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights is going to be applicable in addressing the challenges Ugandans face when they interact with development projects and business enterprises.
it's been a long journey, but we are finally here at a point where we are adopting this action plan, but it doesn't end here. I would want to call to action all players, including the different government departments, civil society, the business community, and affected communities to be able to work together and implement the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights.
I would like to congratulate the Minister of Gender, Labour, Social Development and all its partners upon successfully developing this National Action Plan. So the work starts now.
Congratulations upon the adoption of the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, and now let's implement it.